the kind of diminution of privacy or end of privacy has been announced every 10 years. I mean, you can go all the way back to the 1960s and 1970s, and you can see covers of Time magazine talking about the end of privacy. But I think it has actually substantially changed in the last 10 years, and I think increasingly people see it as a form of currency. They see it as something that they barter in exchange for convenience. I think it varies in terms of generation, so I think certainly the younger demographic regard it as important, but something that they're nevertheless relatively content to surrender. I think, by contrast, what I'd call the intelligentsia are very anxious about it. I'd also say a neglected constituency, corporate organisations are very worried about privacy. So we often talk about the individual and the state. Corporations are often left on the sidelines, but they're quite important. I think the biggest challenge to privacy is intelligence gathering. And I should explain that I mean intelligence broadly defined. So at the end of the Cold War, the activity of intelligence gathering was owned by very specific organisations within government. Now, intelligence is done by all parts of government. If you define intelligence as intelligence, security and resilience, it's done by all major corporations and even to some extent by individuals. So you look at the Boston bombing, in which people were freely trading pictures of suspects on the net, that sort of thing. And all those different constituencies are doing intelligence with big data. So the big collectors of intelligence, or you might say information on the individual, are Tesco, HSBC, Air Canada. These are big collectors of data and they're big consumers of intelligence collection, but not by the conventional organisations that we think of when we talk about spying. Well, I would say privacy is really in the last hours or minutes of its life. And the reason I'd say that is that, in 10 years' time, everything we buy in a shop that costs more than £20 is going to have an IP address. It's going to have a little computer in it that collects data. And everything around us, our handbag, our toaster, is going to be collecting data. So it won't be a case of, you watching your handbag, it'll be your handbag watching you. And we will be happy with that because it will deliver enormous convenience and security. So I think I suppose I'm broadly with a number of, I'm not the only person who's predicting the end of privacy, but I think the really crucial issue is who owns all this data. We talk about big data now, but we haven't even begun to understand the volumes of data that are going to be collected around us over the next 20 years. And the issue is who owns it. So yes, we're looking at the end of privacy, but we're also looking at the end of secrecy. We're looking at the end of secrecy for corporations. Very hard for corporations to hide their tax. The end of secrecy for government. So it'll be hard for governments to build secret prisons. So we're moving towards what David Brin called a transparent society. It could actually be quite exciting. Not only will privacy be greatly diminished, and voluntarily to a degree. I mean, everyone will be doing telemonitoring of their health and sending their private health details up to the cloud. And you don't get much more private than what's going on inside your own body. But I'm going to do that because actually, if I'm going to have a stroke in 2 weeks' time, that little chip in my arm is going to pick that up, and I'm going to be called into my doctor, and I'm not going to die. So the benefits of surrendering my privacy are going to be so overwhelming. The other benefits are going to be that, as long as we get the oversight and control of the information right, it's going to be very difficult for both large corporations and government to commit some of the abuses that we've seen over the last 10 years. Certainly, if my particular area is secret intelligence, and the lens of secret intelligence has changed. So, in the 1980s, during the Cold War, secret intelligence was looking at Chinese missiles, Russian submarines. Intelligence isn't very interested in that stuff anymore. It's mostly interested in people. It's interested in transnational organizations. It's interested in terrorists, people traffickers, organized crime. Essentially, people are the targets. And if you think about which organizations have the most data on people, it's Tesco, it's HSBC, it's the airlines. That's the place where intelligence sits now. I don't think we'll have privacy in 2030, certainly not in the way that we understand it now, or it might say a few individuals might have privacy, but they will be people who have effectively opted out of society. So, certainly in 30 years' time, I'm going to, if I'm still alive, I'm going to think and blink and send an email. But it's probably not going to be called an email. So human beings and computers will be connected. And I think at that point, privacy will either have disappeared for all those people or else changed out of all recognition.